Hey there, Ghosties. Welcome back. It's episode 80 of the Ghost Lights podcast, and this week we sit down with Jordan Leigh. He is currently starring in The Crucible over at Miners Alley. We spend time talking about the early days of growing up in theater and then coming back to Colorado and finding his authentic self. So sit back, relax, and enjoy episode 80 of the Ghost Lights podcast. Only 20 away from 100. Dan, you know what to do. Ghosties, it's your boy Sam Gilstrap. We're back. Episode 80. We're only 20 away from 100. The goal for the end of this year. We've weathered the storm, more or less, of shows and rehearsals, and we are still very much in the thick of things with COVID. So I hope you're wearing your masks when you're out and about. I hope you're staying safe. I hope you got vaccinated. If you didn't, don't worry. There's still opportunities to get vaccinated. I hope you're double checking the science. And with that all being said, the Ghosties are back. They're listening. They're patiently waiting to know who this week's guest is. I gave it a little buzz about 2 weeks ago. He's sexy on top of a chair. Jordan Leigh, how are you, sir?
Sexy on top of a chair.
Yeah, I mean, you're sexy in a lot of ways. I struggled mightily making eye contact for the vast majority of the rehearsal process. And it's predominantly because when I wear my glasses, it's different than when I have my contacts on. I don't know why. I guess.
Well, just to clarify what you mean by that, you see me. I'm on a chair a lot in the show that we are currently in together.
Yes.
Unless you've seen me in chairs randomly about.
Oh man! When I saw you, you would chill during rehearsal processes. Playing Words with Friends. Maybe watching Breaking Bad on his phone. And you just, he looked very powerful and intimidating.
That's right. I know how to take over a chair.
Absolutely. Well, I just want to say thank you so much for being our 80th guest.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure to get a chance to work with you and get to know you a little bit. And the thought this would be a great opportunity to, make an even stronger bond.
For sure.
Yeah. So.
I will tell you. Yeah. See, I'm gonna turn the tables on you right on the beginning. Oh, no. I've seen you in two shows prior to this. The first was Skull of Connemara, I think, or Cripple of Inishman.
Okay.
And I thought you were fantastic.
Oh, thank you.
My friend Meredith Young was in that with you, and that's what brought me to see it because you're a friend in the show. Mm-hmm. And I came up to you afterwards, and I gave you all the props, and then
I pushed you out of the way. Thanks, please.
Not at all. No, not at all.
Okay,
you actually had that reaction that I think a lot of us have as actors when people we don't know come up to it. I mean, you're almost sort of taken aback by it, and so you just kind of take this gracious tone, but sometimes I wonder if I seem awkward, in that tone to people. But in any case, I saw you in that, came up to you, and then I saw you in something else, and then I had run into you a couple times between then.
Oh,
and introduced myself, or in some situation, you and I introduced each other, and. You were like, hey, it's nice to meet you. I'm like, oh, yeah, we've met a couple times. You're like,
no.
Oh, sorry. But that's okay, too. It's just funny to me because, of course, if you know someone, it happens frequently, especially when you're an actor, because you look different in every show that we change every show.
I'm a chameleon on stage.
So am I. Yeah. And anyway, I've thought that was funny for a while.
Yeah.
But now
here I am. Like, it's so nice to meet you. Thank you so much for being a guest on this podcast. We have a history, Sam.
We do. Well, our history is me thinking you're great on stage and telling you, and you forgetting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I get complimented all the time.
I'm sure you do.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, I get random text messages. From the Gil Strappies out there.
That's right. The ghosties and the Gil Strappies.
Yeah. I don't know what Dan, do you have something to add there?
The strap-ons.
Oh. The Gil strap-ons. Yeah.
Oh. I need to get a better last name if I'm going to have fans like that. If you are a fan of Sam Gilstrap and his likes, please tweet at him at the Ghost Lights Podcast too. and give him your name for my quote unquote groupies or fans. I'm uncomfortable. It has been a long time since we've done a podcast. It's been about 2 months, and I'm definitely gonna retrace some of my steps, try and get comfortable at it again. One of the things that always helps is our unofficial sponsor. This week it's Glenfiddich 14. When you've got the time and the money, Glenfiddich 14. There you go. That's your plug, Glenfiddich. Please send your real money to my Venmo account.
Yeah.
Anyway, with that being said, I just want to dive right in. Jordan, how did theater happen to you?
I came from theater people. I mean, I guess so. It was it was just sort of my genetic code. My mom is a theater director and writer and occasional actor. She actually founded Lake Dillon Theater Company.
Oh, get out of town.
Yeah. So shout out to my ma, Lenny Singer. Yeah, she started that when Summit County was nothing, and then Chris Alamon and Josh took it over and have turned it into an incredible place as well. So, but yeah, and my birth dad, he was in theater too. My brother's a professional actor in New York. So we were just we were always putting on shows, and I was starring in the shows from like third grade on. And it was such a comfortable place for me to be that unfortunately I never thought through this very well because it was always just something that I did. I in retrospect, after doing this this long and professionally for 25 years, I frequently wonder, oh wait, what if I had done something else? What would that be like? But it's this is a fascinating thing to do for a life.
Yeah, it is.
However long I can. I do keep trying to retire, and do something else. And every time I do it, which is usually for money, I need to do something else more stable. Then something lands in my lap, and either the universe is laughing at me when it does that, or it's saying, no, this is what you're supposed to be doing, but I keep doing it. So.
When you talked about it was always something that you did, the comfort level that you felt doing it, how does that manifest and as a kid? I'm someone that works with kids, and it's rare that you see someone actually in their comfort zone in something in those young stages of their life. Were you aware of it then? Or is this something that you was like, oh, I just do this, and then as you got older, in retrospect, you're like, connecting the dots and stuff?
I mean, I've also taught and coached a lot of kids, and so I think that if anything, my answer would be like, the kid in the group who just is like a natural, it just takes to it and seems to have that quality. And so I guess that's kind of how both my brother and I were as kids. So when, we were fortunate, I assume that grade schools, some of them still have theater, maybe. Some.
Hope so.
None. I don't know. But we did. And, the grade school I grew up in. And so they put on plays. And, you're in chorus and you're singing and stuff like that. And so when they're putting on plays and, we always used to do voices and we would do shows at home. So even before it was formalized on the fourth grade stage, it felt like second nature. So I guess that's what it is. And yet I'm so fascinated actually by actors who come to it much later in life, who are amazing actors. And I think like, wow, that's so crazy because it is second nature to me. And I have been doing it for so long. And then I think, what was that guy doing prior to adulthood or prior to, high school theater or something like that? And not because this was all I did. I played sports and did other things as a kid. But I always find that fascinating. Was it just that person who came into acting as an adult didn't have the opportunity to explore it as a kid? Which is why I think it's so important that kids have that option, have some chance, because man, there's nothing like theater. Theater accepts every kid. You can be, I mean, yeah, you can get cliquey and everything like any school related thing, but theater itself accepts all the freaks and all but we had, I remember we did Music Man, when I was in 8th grade, and the jocks were in it, and all the musical theater kids were in it, and you're mixing all these people together, and they all come together for that same. I mean, it's amazing what happens every time I'm in a play. I've been doing this long. I'm always amazed at how everybody comes together. Because, and maybe it is because it's so vulnerable, and everybody's ass is on the line. Like, I don't want to be the guy who forgets my part. I don't want to be the guy who ruins it. And somehow that pressure, everyone together, is why it's always so bonding. Like, what we have right now.
Yeah.
We put up this show. This is a crazy beast of a show, the Crucible, that we're doing at Miners Alley.
Yep. Every Thursday, Friday, and Saturday night at 7:30 p.m. Sundays at 2. Get your tickets now.
That's right. 3 more weekends. But, it's a beast of a show, beast of a show. I've done a zillion musicals, and you think like nothing could have more moving parts than a musical. This is nuts. It is nuts. And not only because every single character in this is so integral to driving this storyline, and it really felt like an orchestra. And so each of us, as we're putting it all together, but you knew everybody cared so much about this, cared so much about the piece, cared so much about the theater, cared so much about each other, and of course about their own performance. And yet, there's so many stutters for all of us. And then, you get to that opening and that first weekend, and you're like, oh, I'm hearing the symphony is finally clicking, and it's clicking and it's flowing. And every show, I assume it's like this for you too. You're just seeing it, flow more and more and more, which happens every show. But somehow with this one, and maybe because it's not a musical, so you can't sort of fall back on like, oh, here's this big musical number that always works. And so it's disjointed. This is just like beginning to end, flow, and that's sort of why it feels that way. But the stakes were so high because surely you can get this really wrong.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, right before we opened, someone in the cast had forwarded that SNL sketch about it's the cast party.
That was me.
It was you, dude. I've watched it so many times, and every time I watch it, it always makes me a little uncomfortable too, because I'm so afraid that like my performance is going to end up being as bad as theirs intentionally is in that sketch. The cast party for the Crucible, the high school cast party for the Crucible. And it's much more about sort of high school theater than it is about the Crucible in particular. But I think the reason they chose that play for that sketch is because it has been done for so long, and it does get done even at the high school level. And it's probably bad more often than not.
Oh, yeah.
Because this is heavy, heavy material. And you need really committed, seasoned actors, or this is a melodrama, sort of by every definition. It's high stakes drama, right?
Totally.
And the chance of it slipping into schmacting is huge. Yeah. And I was really afraid of that for myself and for the show, because who wants to be in something that feels that way? You just don't. It's the opposite of what you want. So, but boy, it didn't turn out that way, and it surpassed my expectations, and it just feels good in that way. So I don't know how we tangented onto that, but as far as like where we're still talking about like being a kid in theater.
Being a kid and finding that comfort zone.
Yeah. So that's this is a place that I've been comfortable for a long time. But I think what's so interesting about trying to be a professional actor, at any level, and for me, it was never about like I left LA because I couldn't deal with it's a whole town founded on pretense. And I went to UCLA and
it was pretense, sir.
I cannot hear you. So many quotes, Danforth quotes that are being used. I studied acting and theater very seriously at UCLA, and felt so prepared as an actor and so ill prepared for Los Angeles coming out of school, because I wanted something that felt real. And you can't feel real there. I couldn't feel real there.
What do you define as real in that sense?
Authenticity and what you have, which is ironic because we do make believe for our craft, but you do make believe well when you are authentic as a person.
Yes.
And that's not saying that like every single actor in Los Angeles is inauthentic. That's not true at all. But the vibe of the whole place feels very inauthentic or very
it seems
pretentious.
efforted.
Yeah, it does. It feels much less about the craft and much more about the schmooze, And I'm bad at it. I'm not. It doesn't jive with me. And so,
Same.
So for me, when I came to Colorado 24 years ago. I wasn't coming here to act. I just wanted to get out of LA, and my parents had moved back to Colorado. I was originally from here, grew up in Southern California. And then all of a sudden I was auditioning for shows. And my first show in Denver was Winnie the Pooh at the Arvada Center, playing Mr. Rabbit.
Awesome. If you were Pooh, I would have asked for your autograph.
I see. I see how it is.
Hey, I mean, me and Pooh are tight. You were Eeyore? Oh, forget about it.
That would have been even
I want
better.
to move in.
Yeah, fair enough. Rabbit sort of gets the shaft, but he's actually he's a great character. So that was my first, and all of a sudden I'm being paid to do theater, and right alongside that it was the same director. It was David and Julie Payne, if you know them or have ever worked with them. I mean, they're like old school Denver theater couple, and they're just the salt of the earth. And they cast me in Winnie the Pooh, and they were directing Dracula at Littleton Town Hall, and they needed one more role filled. And they're like, "Would you be interested in maybe playing this part in Dracula? It doesn't pay much. It only pays, I think it was $450 for the run." But I had never been paid to do theater at that point, other than what I was making in the children's theater. And I was like, only $450? Are you kidding me? That's, I'll take that in a heartbeat. I still might take, well, yeah. So then next thing I knew, I'm being paid to do theater. And I was doing voiceover and getting paid for it. I was doing commercials and getting paid for it. And I thought, this is way better than not getting paid to act. And I'll do it in Colorado happily. And 23 years later, that's pretty much all I've done. Wow. A combination of a lot of things, but yeah, I really feel like I could not deal with. I just like doing this. It's what I know how to do well, and it's so. What I find most fascinating about this craft is how there's no other art form where the instrument is the person, right? Yeah. And that's our body, our speech, our past, our psyche, our heart, everything. Yeah. And that's our thing. And that's why, being authentic as a person is going to translate to how you portray another person, which is what we're doing. And it's endlessly fascinating for me. And I'm a really spiritual person. I'm a meditator and a Buddhist. And the more I do this and the longer I do it, the more I find that roles, I'll audition for stuff and not get it right and left, but then all of a sudden a role will sort of come into my lap. And it's like when when a book comes into your life and you're like, oh my God, this was meant for me in this moment. It's so and that happens to me with roles all the time now, where I end up playing this role and I know that it is exactly the right thing at that time because of what I'm going through in my life, or what I'm feeling, what I'm conflicted about, whatever the case might be, and combine that with meditation practice, going hand in hand with what we're trying to do as actors all the time, which is be in the moment. And of course you stray on stage, you stray. And what do? You keep coming back to the moment. That's what you do in meditation too. And you strengthen that ability more and more and more. So yeah, I guess if there was an answer to your question there, it's just that this is part of my makeup, whether I like it or not. Sometimes I do. Sometimes I lament all of this. And usually if I lament it, it's not the craft that I lament. It's the business. Yeah. Because the business is just heartbreaking constantly. And it's fearful to not know where your next paycheck's going to come from. But it also gives you, when the 2008 crash happened and you had like Wall Street guys who were jumping out of buildings and you know, like terrible, horrible things like murder, suicides, and you know, because their whole world had come crashing down. All of that security and knowing where your paychecks were coming from, they had no concept of how to deal with that. It was, well, I might as well, I can't be alive if this is how it is. Whereas we are always out of a job. And I was going to say before that it's precisely because we're always out of a job that I think we give as much as we do. I mean, obviously we do it for the craft and the art, but we also do it because we're always auditioning for the next job in our minds, or at least for me, I'm always thinking like, you know, and not just the performance, but how you are, how you work with people, how you do everything. We're always under the gun there, but that's what keeps us fired up. And I have seen people who didn't, you know, in theater who maybe sort of know where their jobs are coming from, whether they're part of a company or whatever the case might be. And sometimes I suspect that comfort undermines that level of fire. It's not a given, you know, it's not a guarantee, but but comfortable is nice too, you know. So, which is part of what I love about Miners Alley. You know, this is my first show there, but as much as you feel like you're in a family every show you're in, the fact that this is presented, that Miners Alley presents itself to actors, new actors who are coming into that process as family, very specifically. You know, first night read through, and Len is talking about it in that way, and it didn't sound like or feel like smoke being blown. You know, you really sense the authenticity of that. Yeah. And so it's resonated with me deeply. And now I know why people talk about Miners Alley the way that they do, and have for years. And that's not to say there aren't tons of that throughout Denver. I'm sure a lot of theaters have that because it is sort of built into how we have to be when we are this vulnerable with each other. You have to have that level of closeness, and maybe it does turn into conflict sometimes, but hopefully you can work through that like you can in families too. You know,
absolutely. Well, I mean, yeah, exactly. You just touched on it there at the end. I mean, every family's got conflict at some time, and what do you do when you've got conflict with family? You either turn your back or you show up for them.
Yeah,
I mean, that's just like you do with a scene partner,
right?
When we go up, we show up. Like we have to try and find some way to like keep it going.
Yeah,
and there's no stopping that. One of the things I love about Miners Alley, and one of the things I want to echo is like those people, Len, John, Liz, Bree, who's our ASM on this particular show, like Kate, who's, you know, one of our COVID protocol people, who's been directing stuff for there at the kids shows for years, and all those people, they're connected to Brenda Billings, R.I.P. They're connected to Rick Bernstein and Paige Larson. Like that was all handed down. Rory Pierce is a connection. He's a thread to all that. All of these people, Tim Fishbaugh, that have been working together for decades. They're a family, and they try and maybe not project that on every cast that they work with, but they exhibit it, they live it. So it just kind of rubs off.
And that's the thing, right?
Yeah.
It's again, it would be inauthentic if it was just like "Welcome to the family," but it's not. It's completely authentic. And yeah, what an amazing legacy and lore that theater's built. Yeah,
absolutely.
I get it now. I get it.
Yeah. Well, welcome to the family.
Thank you. Yeah. We still have 3 weeks. So
we do have 3 weeks. We could totally be disowned at any point in time. I might get disowned tonight. I don't know.
Well, considering this show has been so strange, in particular because Danforth doesn't enter until the second act, right? So I don't think I've ever been in a show where I only started in the second act, and then he comes in the second act. It's like, this is my show now, like literally, and you know, story wise, because he's running the trials, and he's got such a huge ego, and he's such a maniac and narcissist. He believes in what he's doing, but we know some other people like that in society.
No.
Yeah, you know.
Those people don't exist. That's why it's a play.
That's right. That's
Jordan.
right. Yeah. But it is so crazy to come in and really not enter the stage until I think I'm hitting there about 9:40.
Yeah.
You know, so I come to the theater at 7 o'clock. Yeah, I'm all warmed up and I'm doing my stuff and I'm all ready to go. And, you know, any normal show, you're like, okay, I'm coming in, you know, if not right at the beginning, surely within the first half hour, maybe. Fast forward an hour and 15 minutes and I'm backstage. I'm like, oh God, now I got to start. And it's, man. And then it's also very aggressive and it's very angry and it's very, not who I am as a person, which in general is fun to play for me. I like playing, you know, dark characters and I like playing, characters that aren't very much like me. If I can, even though you're still finding some part in you that can tap into this thing, totally. But boy, he is representative of a toxic masculinity that I am so not about. That I come off stage and I'm glad to be done. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if I've ever felt that way in a play, regardless of what it was, because I don't. You know, I don't like him. I know you're not supposed to judge your character, and when I'm playing him, I like him fine. Yeah. You know, because I'm caught up in the character. Yeah. But I don't. You know, it's kind of harsh. So, but it's so light backstage with all of us that it's not like I'm coming backstage in the doldrums either. Because usually I come backstage and then you know, someone's making some joke or something, and you know, you're fine.
Looking at me when you say that? Oh, it's because we're doing a podcast together.
That's right. Well, it's because your chair is first out the back at the stage door. So if you want to get back to your spot,
you got to go by me.
You got to cross through the gill strap.
And the vast majority of the time, I'm doing something I shouldn't be doing back there.
Maybe, I don't know. I don't see. I try to, you know. I try to keep a low profile.
Yeah, exactly. One of the things I wanted to touch on, I mean, yes, one of the reasons you are on this pod is that we are doing a show together that is actively running, and you've touched on some things that are really cool that I do want to, like, because I might not have all of them on, but I've only done a handful of large cast shows, say with like 13 people, where every single person should be legit starring in.
Yeah.
If the roles were reversed, like every single person could be a John Proctor.
Yeah.
Ever in this show.
Right.
I mean, I'm not talking about like
as far as their skill set is
set's concerned. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, and you want to toss the tables and do some like gender reversals. Hell yeah, you can do it with every single person in this cast, and it's really interesting. It's. I mean,
Len said that, right?
Yeah.
I mean, he said it from the get-go that he knew, because I think he realizes too that if you try to embark on this beast without really quality actors, you're going to be in trouble. I mean, this thing is 3 hours plus with intermission, and there's no singing.
Nope.
You know, or no, I think that maybe a lullaby right in the beginning.
I don't think anyone sings. I
don't pay attention to the first act.
We do a lot of praying. Yeah.
right.
Yeah. I think I do break out into some little Bob Seger in the middle of scene 2, but that's about it. Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
Oh, when you slide across the floor in your undies. And
exactly. Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. It's. I mean, these are not tidy whities, folks. Don't get your hopes up. But yeah, that does happen. But that adds about 20 minutes to the piece. This is not a good sell for the Crucible at Mind Yourself.
No, what I've found amazing, because I was afraid that people would be like, 3 hours, for a non-musical. I mean, most musicals aren't that long unless it's Les Mis or something. So I was afraid, and yet I am not getting a response from either people I see who I don't know or people who have already come and seen it that I do know, that they're like,
they don't feel the time.
You could have cut some of this, and it's because it's because Arthur Miller was so brilliant and such a beautiful wordsmith, and nothing is wasted. I don't think in terms of dialogue, it's everything's there on purpose, and yet, if you don't have the right people using those words, I'd I'm sure I'd fall asleep, in a
Totally.
3-hour production of this. So yeah, I think again, it's a testament to everyone's commitment to this, that's not the case. And Len's casting and his vision to make this relevant. I mean, for those who haven't seen it, who might hear this and want to see it, it is not set in Puritan 1690, but it's also not modernized to the point where we're duding it up. Listen, Proctor, let me tell you something, Proctor.
Hey, bruh.
right, exactly. So it still has that classical speech, because the idea that we've put forth is that this could be today. In if you think of, like, the other day I was trying to think like something recent, and I was thinking of like the Bundys, right? And you have this clan, in a small town, and the FBI is storming that and everything else, and you're kind of like, yeah, man, this could happen in America today in various forms, and obviously the themes of the show absolutely are happening today, but widespread. This is just a slice of that in one small town, because that's how Arthur Miller wrote it, to comment on what he was commenting.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
One of the things I did want to touch on, I think, because you do have this beautiful source material, the script written by Arthur Miller, I find actors who are not necessarily confident in their skill set will look at the material and want to add more breath to it, because it's so weighty, to steal another line from the play. And I find with a gag in my mouth, there are moments where it feels like, speed it up, guys,
because you have to watch it.
Yeah, I have to watch it, and I got to breathe with this thing in my mouth. But I still feel like we earned that. I think we're driving up until, and we earn that respite.
We do, but
we pick it back up again near the end of that stuff. It's great.
As the guy who's driving that courtroom scene, as the character playing the character who's driving that courtroom scene, again, because this was such a symphony, and I knew it wasn't where it needed to be. You of course you want to be polished as soon as people are watching it.
Totally.
It's just not, and it can't be. We did a knock-up job, when we opened, I think, but already just a few shows in, it is now it's smooth, and I knew that so much of that tempo, that courtroom scene. I agree that we have earned the caesura, the pauses in there. But that said, the tendency, even with polished actors, it's because you see it with Shakespeare all the time. You see it with Shakespeare all the time, where you're not acting on the line. Where it's like, let me show you how weighty this is, and the big pauses, and I have to rein myself in, because it feels like you want to do that, but unless it's earned in a moment, it doesn't need to happen. Everything's there on the line, so act on the line, right? But yeah, then. When those intense moments do happen, that they need to happen. Those pauses, those beats. So yeah.
When we talked about earlier, you were talking about your transition back from California and the things that you were doing. You mentioned your voiceover work. You are also, when you're not doing the acting stuff, you're an agent. Yes.
Yeah.
For which company again?
Donna Baldwin Agency, talent agent in Denver, that I'm sure all the actors who might be listening to this are aware of, because there's not that many talent agencies in town, and they are, I think, maybe the oldest in Denver. Have been around for 30 plus years. I was represented by them as an actor for most of the time that I've been here, and the voiceover industry, and I'll make this really short because it's actually kind of boring. The voiceover industry has changed a ton in the last 10, 12, 15 years, mostly because of home studios that actors have to have, voice actors, and because of the pay sites that some of them, voices.com and voice123.com, that have just changed the nature of the industry. And it has flooded the market with more opportunity than you ever had as a voice actor, but way more people doing it. And so something I used to be able to rely on as probably half my bread and butter per year, if not more on some years, just kept getting chopped away and chopped away and chopped away. And of course, as an actor, you're like, what am I doing? Am I sucking all of a sudden? Like, and you're like, no, this is it's voiceover. It's not that, it's not Shakespeare, right? It's not The Crucible. It really is because there's that many more people submitting per job, and nationally, because actors can work from home because they all have home studios. So when this opportunity arose to take over as a voiceover agent at Donna Baldwin, I kind of jumped on that, which is nice because I can do it. I already knew the business because you're representing yourself as your own agent in this business all the time anyway. So I already knew the business. Then it's just became about managing a roster and signing, people. And I'm also an acting coach and a voiceover coach. So my actors love me because I actually know what they go through as an actor. And so you get a lot of the thing about voiceovers. I would say 90% of the roster have no background in theater, no formal acting training, no interest in doing anything other than voiceover. And so they don't speak the language that we speak as actors. So, I feel like I have, and it's not to say that they're bad, because again, most, at least commercial and narration voiceover, there's voiceover that requires acting for sure, but most commercial and narration, which is the bulk of what pays, it's mostly, reading out loud well.
Yeah.
I mean, it is. And so if you can take a piece of copy, narration, script, or otherwise, and sound good, it's not this guy anymore. In fact, there's a backlash against that because that voiceover was the only voice in town, men dominating, this guy, and those poor guys, I know them and I have them on the roster, and they're always just sort of like, why don't I get jobs anymore? It's like, sorry, they don't want that anymore. Now what they want is real. And that's great, but I do have to hone some of these people, hone the acting part of it for them, because they just don't have any of that anchoring in that. But I mean, I love doing voiceover myself. It's just unfortunately the industry has changed, and so I took over this job. And I like actors. I like people who because it's vulnerable, and I like vulnerable people. So. Because then I can prey on them. I like
Rubik's Cube.
I mean, it goes back to what I was saying before. I mean, I like vulnerability because I think there's no point in living this life that is decidedly vulnerable. Pretending that it's not, I don't think gets you anywhere. Maybe. I mean, I understand because it's a painful. There's a lot of pain in this life. So building up walls against vulnerability is completely understandable. I get it. I just don't. I can't do that. It's not in me. I wish I could sometimes, but because God knows I've been through the ringer a million times over, but I don't know how to do that. So for me, when vulnerable actors come to me as a coach, or in this case as an agent, much as it also can be tiring, like, I get a lot of submissions per week, and some people already are doing voiceover and they're looking for representation, and a lot of them are just like, I just started this. Tell me what I'm supposed to do. People tell me I have a really good voice all the time. And I really want to get into voiceover. I hear you can make a lot of money in voiceover, all these typical things. And I'm like, okay, I really don't want to do that. But I can't say no. So I end up sort of, taking them under my wing and, walking this line of not wanting to burst their bubble while not wanting to blow smoke up their ass. Because what good does it do to send someone off into this career, voiceover or any aspect of it, with the idea that it's not as hard as it is, but you don't want to step on people's dreams. So that's a fine line to walk, and I've honed that skill, I think, fairly well. But yeah, so that's the voiceover thing.
No, I think from a person who's also done coaching, like I've taught here at the JCC on a handful of occasions, and we'll probably do it again given the right opportunity. But it's I'm working with kids, and I'm like, this is the job. Like, this is how hard it is, and this is what you have to do. And if you're not ready on this day, then you're hurting yourself, and you're hurting the opportunity that you have, and you're hurting the processes as a whole. And I try and spell all that out. And then once I've spelled out the difficulties and the challenges that they face, that's when I start doing the build-up process.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, so we tried our hand at A. Let's try B and see if that works. And I've got C and D in the back pocket if you need it. And
you kind of have to do it that way.
Yeah.
I think because I came from a mom who was already a professional, it was drilled into my mind, drilled into my acting world from the get-go. Yeah. Professionalism was drilled into that. And so what that means to me, I get, is different than what it sometimes means to other people. But I know what it means to me. And so, but I don't see that as, it can be frustrating because your professionalism comes up against someone else's whose is not the same as yours. Mm-hmm. But for me personally, I would have it no other way for myself, because quality comes from that professionalism. And I don't think there's any reason to do this if you don't want to do it to the best of there's no reason to do anything if you don't want to do it to the best of your ability. Mm. And so that was drilled into my head from an early age. And what I've found when I direct kids or coach kids, and it's the same if you're coaching kids in sports or anything like that, where you don't have to, drill professionalism into them with, a whip. You drill it into them by making them understand that the real fun comes from that. And sure enough, I've seen it every show my mom's ever directed with kids, every show that I've directed, where they have more fun when you've instilled that quality in them. Thank you. Of why not waving to your parents, during their why even if you're 8, these things matter. And even if they don't fully understand it intellectually, some part of them gets it. And I know it from experience where the kids that I've directed, when the show was over, were just heartbroken. Like they just didn't want it to end. And I think a lot of that is just because you instill in them this belief that they can, why it's important to want to be the best you can be in something like this, so.
When I approached acting and I got started, and this is definitely an old anecdote that some of my ghosties are probably pretty familiar with, but I came from a background of learning how to be a part of a sports team, like football, basketball, baseball, coaching kids along those lines. And while I'm coaching them specific skill sets, like I'm urging them to be as good as they possibly can be, because W's are fun.
Right.
And when you get into, and not to say that losses can't be fun, we do not want to play the game if we're not having fun.
No, and at least if you've lost, if you knew that you gave it your all and you didn't lose because you didn't give it your all, you still feel satisfied.
Exactly. That's a great point. And I think that's one of the things that I miss for the longest. That's a great word to encapsulate this thought. I was constantly pushing myself. I was constantly trying to be the best. And I was doing this presentational acting for a really long time in my career, at least the first 7 years. And I didn't start transitioning out of that until I realized just how hollow I felt with the presentational form of it. Because the thing that I wanted to say when you were talking about those types of actors and that type of acting performance-wise is that there are authentic moments that creep into that type of actor, that type of person, and they don't know what that is. They don't like to feel that authenticity, and so they wall it up.
Right.
And I'm hung up on this tweet I saw that my friend Hayden posted about how people are so wrapped up in their own trauma that trying to show them that there's another thing is insulting to them. And there are people who are locked up in their processes, their belief structures, any of those things that offering, and even if it's just an offer of another avenue, it's a gigantic turnoff. And at this type of,
how did you finally come to then realized that when you had those breakthroughs amidst a sea of presentation, that's where you needed to go. That's where you wanted to go.
It was the catharsis, the personal therapeutic catharsis. And we've often talked on this podcast, and it's often been a note in many acting classes I've taken, that don't treat theater as a means of dealing with your mental stuff. It's just it's not necessarily therapy. But I think if you are not aware of what a moment in a play does to you, like, why am I choked up when I watch Jay put his scarf on Anastasia as she's leaving? That gets me every night. I don't have to facilitate anything, and I don't watch any of it because it's a personal moment between a husband and wife character, and I feel like in this community we don't get to watch those things. Yeah. So I turn away from it, but all of it is echoing something inside my brain, inside my heart. And when I was younger, I would have those moments and I would feel those things, and I'm like, well, I was blocked to just be stern here. But why do I feel that way? What is it about this relationship? What is it about intimacy? And I would learn those things, and I would want to follow that more.
Yeah,
because
it feels good to be.
It does
vulnerable.
feel good.
I mean, that's the thing about it, and I think that I think the problems in our society, could so if everyone just did a show, but it really. I think most people, and again, especially with toxic masculinity, which, let's face it, there's a lot more women in our society who seem to be toxic masculine now at this point. Where as a man, I'm looking back and going like, oh man, what's happening there? Why are you so aggressive? And I guess that's just a metaphor for aggression, toxic masculinity. In my mind, but I don't think these people want to be that way ultimately. I don't think they're bad people. I think it's just about getting back to this place. Here's how I look at it is and I have strong political opinions for sure. But I as a dog guy, passionate dog guy.
Shout out to dogs.
Yeah, shout out to dogs for sure.
Right. Pet them if you got them.
I just lost my two pups this year in 2021 within 2 months of each other. One was 17, one was 18. But for a year, and it's been a strange adjustment not having dogs in my life for the first time in so long. But day after day, and I was like committed to walking my dogs every day. And I would think about this as politics would overwhelm me, that if I see someone else with a dog when I'm walking my dog, the first thing I think is, well, first I'm like, oh, that's a cute dog. And then I think, oh, that's a person who likes dogs too, right? I mean, or even if it's unspoken or unthought. I mean, the presumption is we're alike. We both like dogs. And, and of course, dog lovers come in all shapes and sizes. But my guess, and sometimes you'll start talking to that person because the dog starts sniffing, and you aren't thinking, like, oh, but what if this person is, this way or that way politically, or some kind of hater. You're just, you don't care. Yeah. And if that person in that moment started, having a heart attack, or something happened, you're just helping another person. Like, it's not that. I really, really, really believe that is at the core of our problem. And it's on both sides. On the left, obviously we tend to be more touchy-feely, saying, that we care more, but we're all bunched up too. Yeah. And so we all need to...
We're bunched up about saying that we're touchy-feely and really supportive. Like, we are really locked into being that type of person. Yeah. And we might be saying that to convince ourselves that that's what we are, and not doing the work to get
I'm not
there.
a hater, but I hate that guy.
Exactly.
But I do think that that is what keeps me in theater in part, is just, and it's actually, I guess sometimes it's a problem because we assume, because we're in theater, that, everybody's as vulnerable as we are. And I think most probably are much less. But I also feel like when you're vulnerable around people who are not naturally vulnerable, it brings their vulnerability out really easily. I mean, I've experienced it so many times in my life. And So it always makes everything better.
Yeah.
As far as I can tell, and it surely makes everything in theater better. And I agree with you that theater's not a place, you don't want to be.
You can't rely on it. I think of what you're saying is like you can't rely on theater to be your therapy at every time.
That's what I was going to say. Right.
Yeah.
It's therapy in that this craft is, by definition, you can't, if you aren't willing to go into yourself, then you're not going to be authentic. Obviously there's a time and a place for it in a rehearsal process, and this is where professionalism is sometimes like, okay, well, we got to move on. We can't do this. And I'm guilty of it, as any director who's worked with me would probably tell you, like, okay, Jordan, but we really have to move on. I wish we had more time to do so much table work and so much scene work. But I will also tell you that I have been in theater experiences, in particular. I did I Love You Perfect Now Change at the Denver Center, and the director who came out from New York to direct that, a guy named Ray Roderick, he was an actor first, and I think some of the best directors were actors because they know that it's vulnerable, right? So he was an actor first, and he was able to, he's so vulnerable as a person and as a director from day one that all you want to do is be as vulnerable as you possibly can. And I don't think he's faking it. You'd see through that bullshit. He loves theater so much. He loves people. He loves love. He loves relationships so much that from day one, he had you ready to be as open as possible. And I'm telling you, somehow in that rehearsal process, and you're doing 8 hours a day, 6 days a week, for 2.5 weeks, or 3 weeks before your first preview. So it's that kind of intense schedule of that kind of union schedule, and a musical. So you needed time for music rehearsals and choreography and all the rest of it. But he always had ample time to work the acting of it. And I will say this to my dying acting day, that I think whatever it feels like in a process, we don't have time for that, because the stress of getting it up on its feet, all the technical aspects of theater, all of that, all the show of a show. What is the point? I've seen a million shows that are beautiful and big and amazing theatrically, and I didn't care about anyone on stage. And it wasn't because the actors weren't quality actors. It wasn't because the material wasn't quality. I think it's, you
can get a sense of it.
I think it's because a lot of times in that process, some directors, either they think like, you know what, you're an actor. It's not my job to hold your hand in this process. It's your job to do it on your own. And it's like, well, yeah, again, we're not asking you to do the performance for us, but we're going to be it is your job to want the show to be as good as it can be. And I'm telling you, it's going to be better if we're as good as we can be, and we're going to be as good as we can be if that vulnerability is there. And so taking the time that might feel like it's undercutting, oh God, but we really got to get this staged. We got to get this staged. You get it staged, and it's going to be so much better. And I, as an audience member, I feel like if I had to choose between being an actor for the rest of my life or being an audience member, I'd be an audience member, because I would rather be moved ultimately by storytelling than doing the moving, if I had to choose. But so frequently I go in, and I don't go in as an audience member with like actor chip on my shoulder, like, all right, impress me. Let's see what you got. Like, I don't care. First of all, I'm paying for a ticket. I want my money's worth, and I want to be moved. Yeah. And so frequently I will go see something, and it's got all the parts there except the most important part,
the heart.
And right. And not because I'm judging it, but because if it didn't move me, and it's not the material, and it's not the quality of the actors that you have on that stage, then there's only one other choice. And it's because you didn't take the time to do the most important thing from this actor's point of view. I think it's the most important thing. And I'm telling you, part of why I Love You Perfect Now Change ran for 4 years, because it's not, that material is mostly fluff. It's accessible, and it's good fluff, but it's fluff, right? But the reason that fluff ran for 4 years is because I strongly believe because he was able to create something with that show that it isn't usually. And he would come back after it's a trippy experience doing a show 8 times a week for 4 years, because as soon as you get past like the 2-month mark, you're already doing more performances of a single show than you've ever probably done, or I was. And so let alone when you're at the 6-month mark or the 1-year mark or the 3-year mark, it's insane. Like it's so crazy. But he would come back and see the show. And of course it would get sloppy and things, you're starting to phone some stuff in and stuff like that. And somehow you've done it hundreds of times now. And he would still do pickup rehearsals for 2 days, hours, 2 days, and work scenes, work moments that you'd done hundreds of times, and you would find new things. And then you'd go do the show that night, and lo and behold, that thing that you're talking about, because instead of playing for the laugh, because you knew that was coming, and you're like, this is where I get this big laugh, and you undercut everything that got you the laugh in the first place, which is being honest. But you can't be honest if you aren't being vulnerable. And so he would suck us back into that vulnerability, and sure enough, the laughs were way bigger than they'd been week in and week out. And you felt that pureness of craft that you're talking about that is always worth it. It's always worth it. And it's hard. It is hard. And it's especially hard when you're doing it, 8 times a week. But he proved to me in my career, and that, that was 20 years ago that we opened that show. He proved to me that, no, it's always possible in any show with any material to go back to the basics of what we all learned in acting class. What was I remember my first college acting class. And of course, back then I was a punk, I'd already been the star of all my high school shows, and I had an amazing high school theater teacher too. So I actually had been exposed to a lot of really great acting training, but, thought I knew everything. And so acting 101 my freshman year at UCLA, and we're doing trust exercises, and falling into each other's arms and stuff. And I was just like, oh my God, man, I want to do scenes. I want to do like raw stuff. I want to cry. But then fast forward, into my career, I'm like, oh, right. It is about trust, and it is about vulnerability, and it is about that stuff. It is. I absolutely believe it's about that stuff, regardless of whether it's, a fluffier script or The Crucible. You can't go into that. At least most actors. I mean, there are probably actors who are, as a person, and tuned out, who somehow can then like turn it on, and it's still an amazing performance, I guess. I think Len said in his podcast, and I thought this was interesting, that some of the best actors that he knows of or has worked with are actually crazy, or I forget what exactly what he said.
Yeah, no, we are crazy.
He didn't say not vulnerable, but the suggestion was, at least the way I was interpreting that statement in the moment, was that somehow maybe in his experience, some of the best actors he's worked with are maybe not vulnerable people to be around. I don't want to put words in his mouth, but that's sort of what I was taking in that moment, and I marvel at that. Of course, we've all seen like method guys who are like, super nutty and have blow ups and things like that. And I get it. This stuff is intense, and surely if you're Christian Bale and you're working at that level, and someone blows a take because of a gaffer walking through the scene, you're going to lose your temper. But to his credit, he also very genuinely after that, was so full of genuine humility and said, it's uncalled for. It is completely unacceptable, but you got to understand what I am doing with my instrument when I do this stuff. And that's why he's so effective, I think. But, you could have great performances by someone who is a sociopath, I guess.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I mean, I think that's one of the things that I love about theater. You were talking about all the people that it attracts. Hopefully we got some of that. I'm sorry, Dan. Dan's looking right at me. One of the things I love about theater, as now I'm closer to the microphone, I really like to do this whole thing like I'm fucking Shatner here, like sliding from side to side in my chair as I talk to people.
Jordan, don't you tell me what?
But so you were talking about the people that the theater attracts, and it is like any large grouping of people, like a football team, a basketball team. These are tropes we've used a lot tonight, but they're very true. You have people with different upbringings, different ways of handling things, different traumas experienced, so on and so forth. The list is varied, and I feel like you can be an authentic, effective actor if you are a guarded human being, and you can. Yeah, I think you can. It's where you choose to be that, and I think one of the things that you might encounter if you're guarded all the time is like you pick your spots. How vulnerable am I? How authentic do I go here? And it doesn't mean that...
You mean you pick your spots within a script, or you pick your spots in life?
All of the above.
Sure.
Yes.
But even in a script, I think that ideally, and of course none of us are there, all of the time in a show, right? Because again, it's like meditation. But ideally, if you could be, and I don't mean like masturbatory kind of vulnerability on stage where you're milking everything. What I mean though is just, and because we obviously have to focus on a whole lot of things when we're on stage or on camera for that matter. So you're not just present as this character all the time. You got to hit your mark. You got to hit your light. It's like in Miner's Alley, it's like, oh man, I got to make sure these angles are right because it's this weird shaped theater with three sides. You have to think about those things too. It is a very technical craft, but in all that technicality, clearly what you're trying for is to be as present as possible, and being present is being vulnerable. I don't disagree with what you're saying that obviously you're not going to be there all the time, but I think the goal should be to be as present as possible, right?
Yeah, I mean, yes, I think that's my desire. And we've admitted that there are people from different walks of life who make it to various stages within the community or within the game of theater, performance art, that can do this without being totally authentic and stick around for years.
Oh, sure.
And make careers out of it.
Right.
It's so like I tread on the side of like I'm never going to tell anyone how to do their work. Their process is their process, and I don't judge it, because watching me do this show, anyone would think that he doesn't. I don't know how much he cares. I'm sitting in a chair watching football up until my cue, like literally on Sundays. That's what I'm doing.
That doesn't bother me at all. Yeah. I don't think that. I think it can be turned on in the moment. I don't think you need people to call you by your character name backstage and remove yourself from the
things
fun,
I've done,
fun that is theater as well. I don't agree with that.
I've had to try it all. Yeah,
that's right. And I don't judge people's process either, but I do ultimately. I'm going to be affected or I'm not by their performance and by my own performance, and so I mean, I think there's two ways to look at there are people who have longevity, in Hollywood or in Denver, wherever, they have longevity, and maybe you're like, that guy's no good. Longevity
Bloom.
Isn't because, what'd you say?
Orlando Bloom.
You're not an Orlando Bloom fan.
I'm not.
He's Legolas, man. Come on.
Yeah, sure, whatever. Any pretty boy could have played that elfin freak. I don't believe he was shooting those arrows. And if all you Lord of the Rings fans can get at me.
I would have
put anyone in that part.
I actually am a huge Lord of the Rings movie fan. I'm ashamed to say I have not read the books, and I've been excoriated.
Remember,
for that
his last name is properly pronounced Tolkien.
Yes.
Anyway, go ahead.
Right, but I will say that it did strike me as odd watching Orlando Bloom in those movies, because I always thought like, oh, this guy he must not be British because he's sort of got a bad British accent, and then I found out that he was British, and I thought, oh, maybe that's just because he's not that good about it. Like if a British actor seems like they have a bad British accent, so you assume they're an American doing a bad British accent. Oh yeah, maybe not so good.
Especially with the first name like Orlando. But then again, there's a movie out there starring the Amazeballs Tilda Swinton, I believe, entitled Orlando.
That's true.
Yeah. So what do I know?
So
going back to what we were talking about, I don't need to stop
it
just so we can shit on Orlando Bloom.
But great. Yeah. Orlando Bloom's going to hear about this, and I'm never going to get to be in another Lord of the
get
Rings
at
movie.
me. Orlando Bloom, if you want this smoke, come and get it. I will do the whole Tony Stark and give you my address, brother. Anyway.
No, I actually, maybe it's just because I geek out when I watch Lord of the Rings, but, I'm okay with Legolas.
You're allowed to geek out there.
But I do think that I think you're right. I think that there are levels of this vulnerability that I'm talking about, and surely as a person you can be less vulnerable. As an actor, you can be less vulnerable than others. And let's face it, there are also actors who are just like, blah, look at me. It's I'm an open book, and you're like, maybe you need to sort of.
Some of those people
tone
start
that down.
Podcasts.
Some of those people what?
Start podcasts about acting.
You?
No, of course not. No, definitely me. Definitely me.
But you're not. But what I mean is like they're always on.
Yeah,
But
I
actually, I don't see that as vulnerable. I see that as a wall. I see that as a performance, and that's covering up real vulnerability.
Yeah.
But that said, that doesn't mean they aren't without skill. And maybe when they get on stage, that's when the vulnerability does happen. So yes, it's possible that off stage. The walls come up, and on stage maybe they come down. So I stand corrected in that I don't think that great acting has to be people who are always an open book. But I do think that at least when you're doing the great acting, if you are at least not a student of the human condition, starting with your own human condition, I don't know how it's possible. I don't know how you could tap into. Last year, the show that I was in when COVID hit, that I was so fortunate because we only had our final 3 performances canceled, where friends around me are having who are about to open shows and the whole thing's canceled, or about to start rehearsals and the whole contract is dust. I did a show called Secrets of the Universe and Other Songs at the Aurora Fox. There was a new show, and I played Albert Einstein in it, and he ages throughout the show, and in the final part of the show, is basically right before he's about to die. And my dad was dying. He didn't have much. He only had, as it turns out, maybe another month to live. And I knew this. He was in North Carolina, and I was in Denver. And as I'm playing. This old gray character with a mustache, my dad's old gray character with a mustache, and he's talking about his death that's coming in these final scenes, and there is zero chance that I'm not thinking about my dad in that moment. There's zero chance that's not happening. But I'm a professional. And I care about the storytelling, and I care about these people who bought tickets. So of course, I have to keep it in check so that I don't lose my shit, in that moment.
Totally.
But I absolutely used all of that in that moment as well. I would have been doing myself and the show and the role a disservice not to use this very authentic vulnerability in that moment. And it was maybe the most powerful acting experience I've ever had, because I've only had my dad die once. And sure enough, as I was sort of referencing before, here's this role that is dropped in my lap while my dad is dying, and I'm playing this character. And amazingly, we got to tape it. Because usually with equity, you don't get to tape the show. Now we have different rules because of COVID and streaming and stuff, which is great. But I managed to sort of finagle that we could, that it would just be shared with my parents, who are in North Carolina. So my dad could see it before he died, because he didn't come out and see it. And we managed to get the videographer in there on the last show before it was canceled. So it was the final Thursday before the Friday, Saturday, and Sunday were canceled. And they were able to watch it on their big TV, and he was cognizant enough to take it in and everything. And oh my God, I mean, it absolutely felt like that was meant to be, and I don't necessarily, subscribe to, everything's meant to be, in a sort of glib way. But man, that felt like it aligned so beautifully. And again, how could I have played that without being vulnerable? Yeah. There's no way. Mm-hmm. And I think it absolutely made my performance better.
Yeah.
To be open to that. But I wouldn't judge someone for not being able to do that, because that shit's hard.
Oh, yeah.
It was hard. And I did have to rein it in sometimes, because as I'm sitting there playing this, there were times where I'm just thinking of my dad while I'm doing it, and wanted and almost just lost it. Mm-hmm. It's like, no, professional, you can't do that. You're playing a role, rein it in. But
it's what I don't want to speak to that moment in terms of like how I'm sure you adjusted the process, but I mean, I think what you're describing is like it fueled some type of reverence and or respect to the moment that this character is living through.
That's
living through it on
right,
your
because
own.
I haven't been an old dying man yet, right? Mm-hmm. So we talk about acting, and it is pretending.
Yeah.
So as much backstory or as much sense memory or as much method as you want to try to do, there's things that you will not have experienced. Yeah. So it's imagination, it's pretending, and you can associate all you want. But I had never had a dad die, and I've never been an old dying man. Mm-hmm. So guess what? I absolutely did everything I could to feel like what that would feel like, and not just an old dying man, but in his case, in Einstein's case, and in my dad's case, I think an old dying man with all these regrets. And all these unfulfilled, aspirations. And that's what made it the most heartbreaking. Yeah. The dying wasn't the heartbreaking thing. It was dying with all of that regret. Mm-hmm. And man, I mean, if that doesn't break your heart wide open, then what's going to break it open?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think it's, first of all, let me just say thank you for sharing that story with us. I mean, that's fucking beautiful, and thank you very much. I know my personal self, like I really hope I don't get a part around that time when my mom's got to go.
Yeah,
it's gonna be one of those things where I'm like, okay, I don't know how ready I am for this, but let's go for it anyway. But so thank you. That I'm sure was not the easiest thing.
It wasn't to talk about it or to do it.
All of it.
Well, I mean, for me, because I mean it when I say it about this vulnerability factor in life, and this authenticity factor in life, that it's not easy because it hurts, but hurting is not something. Hurting is authentic. Mm-hmm. So if I'm gonna be authentic as I can be as a person, then even when it hurts, there's a part of it that's so beautiful, and I think we are here to be that. I think surely as a Buddhist, I think that and any spiritual practitioner, someone who is on a spiritual path, not just material, but spiritual, then I think that's what you realize when things hurt. When my dogs died within 2 months of each other this year, it was harder than my dad dying, because I took care of those dogs every day for 17 years. I know that might sound a little strange, but harder in the sense that very specifically, these are beings that I take care of. My dad took care of me, losing him, but losing a being that you're taking care of is its own kind of grief. And I don't want to go through that again, but it's raw and real, and I think that if we are going to tap into as humans our true nature. You can call it whatever you want. You can call it Buddha nature in Buddhism. You call it God nature, Christ nature. Call it, enlightened nature, whatever. If we indeed have that ability to discover a bigger sense of why we're here and who we are, more than just this perceived otherness, this self and other, this dualistic thing. Sam has long hair and Jordan has this. We were so sight oriented, and it just reinforces duality all the time. But I think we all have this true sense, which is why it feels good to be vulnerable. I think this true sense that the thing we really are, that transcends this temporary otherness, this temporary duality. The reason it feels good even when it hurts, feels right even when it hurts, is because you're tapping into what you really are. But if you are too afraid of the hurt, then you can't. Then you're selling yourself short. You're selling your journey short. I had a situation with a homeless guy on the side of the freeway who was always there. I used to live over off of Federal and by Regis for years, and it was always the same guy over off of I-70 and Federal. And he, like all of us, you're getting off the freeway and you see, people panhandling and some people totally ignore it. Some people give money and then roll up their window. And, I don't know. I only know me, but I know that it's always a little uncomfortable, right? And of course, you've also been told things like, well, if you give them money, they just drink it away and you should just give it to a homeless shelter and blah. And it's like, okay, but the impetus to help that person, I think is the most important thing. And so on this particular day, when I pulled off on this off ramp that I pulled off on several times a day, here's this guy, and he had his hands were malformed. So not only was he homeless, he had a physical disability, and he had cleaned up trash and stuff. And so I rolled down my window and I was determined, I was going to give him some money, and I was determined. And he said, I just want you to know that I worked, I cleaned up over here. So I'm not just begging, I worked and I kept the clean. And so I'm seeing this, and I'm seeing his hands. And in this moment, I'm like, okay, I am giving him money is one thing. But what do we do usually when we give him money? We're like, okay, bye. And you roll up the window and you turn your head because it's uncomfortable. It's vulnerable. You're seeing this person who you're just like, okay, I want to be a good person. But in this case, I was like, no, you know what? You're not going to roll up your window, and you're not going to turn your head. You're going to keep talking to this human being who is you. And it was some crazy thing. For whatever reason, the light did not turn green. Like I was the first in the series. Yeah. And again, I took this off ramp constantly, and I knew what the cycle was on this light. And for whatever reason, it glitched, right? Because I needed to have this experience. It kept skipping cycles. And so the traffic's piling up behind me, but I'm not going because it's still red. And so I'm talking to him, and the whole time it's still also uncomfortable, and I want to turn my head and roll up my window and be on my way. And so finally, but I don't. And finally, the light turns green. I'm like, okay, well, be well, take care. And then I drive out. I still don't roll up my window. I'm just like, I'm not gonna, because that's this barrier, right? So I keep the window down, and I drive on Federal, and my house is only like 3 blocks further. And I pull into my driveway, and I just lost it for like 10 minutes, just weeping. Like I've never, I can feel it now. Like, it was this massive thing that I had not experienced for a reason like that. I'd been through heartbreak that made me weep, on that level, but I'd never had it in a situation like that. And yet the whole time, as open and broken or not broken, but as open-hearted and vulnerable as that felt, nothing could have felt more right. That's because that's what I think we're here to do. And that's what I find so fascinating and beautiful about this art form that we do, because we, as much as I love singing and as much as I admire musicians and painters and writers, they get to still sort of like be shielded. And yes, we're shielded behind characters, but it's still us out there, right? And I think it's an amazing thing because of that we get out there. People think that because we get applause, I'm actually very uncomfortable with curtain calls. It's an odd thing for me. It's sort of like, okay, thank you. Can I go now? But it's not about that for me. It is about somehow being a part of that process of trying to tap into our humanity, the deeper aspects of who we really are. And that's what I mean when I talk about vulnerability, and maybe that's why it's hard for me to play Danforth, because other than in that final scene where he's afraid that rebellion is happening because he's afraid of being lynched or taken down from his power position, there's a little bit of vulnerability there, but he doesn't have much room for vulnerability, if for no other reason than to save himself, right? Yeah. And so it's rare that I play a character who it just has no vulnerability, so little vulnerability, and maybe that's why it doesn't feel so good when it's done for me.
That's a good point. I mean, there's no release for you. It feels like in the moments that you're on stage with them. It's hard to get away from it.
The only release I get is the rage release, which, let's face it, that can feel good too.
That's good.
Especially in the moment where he rages in that final scene, that he will not postpone these trials. That's when he finally lets go. Yeah. So it's letting go, but it's letting go through rage. And I don't think ultimately that leads us to vulnerability. Sometimes, there are people who aren't in touch with their anger, aren't in touch with, they've been somehow schooled to, never let out their anger. And I don't think that's healthy for us either, but it's a fine line, because then obviously anger can feed on itself. Take road rage, how easy it is to, become enraged, at a stranger, on the road. But yeah, that's as far as he gets in that is to let it go. And then, because he always needs to be in control, he pulls it back in. Danforth, and it's like, now back to business. What have you spoken with them all, Mr. Hale? And he's back at it. But yeah, that's not my favorite kind of character to play. Yeah. It's just
there's no place for it to go sometimes. And when you come off stage, and that recalibrating and reconnecting with Jordan is probably a little harder than it is on other shows.
Yeah. I mean, in the sense of, it's not so much recalibrating with Jordan, although I will say these last 2 weeks, I got sick right before opening, and I'm still lingering. I've never been sick during the opening. I've been sick during runs of a show, and the show must go on, so we pull it off. Totally. And actors are, what this show needs is non-actors to listen to it, because there are so many people who don't actually understand how weird this shit is that we do. Yeah. Everybody knows the show must go on, but they don't actually understand that actors are, fucking troopers, man, on a level that a lot of people are never forced into. And when we say the show must go on, I mean, we fucking mean that shit, right? It is actually, it's because it's about the whole. It's not about you like, oh, the show must go on. I need to make sure that I go do my job. Yes, it's part of that, because your job is part of that whole. It always has that feel of it. But I've never been sick while trying to open a show. And so last week I was just like, oh, fuck, really? Yeah. And not to mention, I was like, oh God, what if it's COVID? And fortunately, it wasn't. We're all vaccinated, but still, I was worried. But I mean, my head was cloudy and stuff. And then we got through opening weekend, and last Monday, a week ago, I was like, okay, now I'm feeling better. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, no shows. By Wednesday, I was feeling better. I still, now it came back. And I think it's because I'm playing this very aggressive character, and it's an energy that, despite the fact that I know that it's not me, I think it's affecting my body. Yeah. I think that it's a fascinating concept too. My girlfriend's a neuroscientist, and so we were talking the other day about, they've done these experiments with athletes where they hook them up to monitors of their brain, where they run their race in their head, and see what fires in their brain, and they run and they hook them up to the same monitors when they're actually running their race, and it's identical, right? And the implication there is that the brain doesn't know the difference in a lot of ways of what we imagine versus what we are actually doing. Thoughts are things, and our reality is shaped by that. And so, it got me thinking about, like, well, if you are playing a really aggressive character, even if consciously that I'm not really angry. I'm not angry at Proctor. I'm not angry at Jihad. I'm not angry, at any of the characters that I scream at, which I think is pretty much every character in the show. Right? Yeah. So I love everyone in the show. So I know that consciously, but I'm wondering if some part of my brain, it's still releasing chemicals based on the outside in, that I'm raging on the outside because that's the performance, and it's affecting my health. I don't know for sure, but I don't know that I've ever felt better from a cold and then started feeling worse again like this. But again, to be sure, it's not COVID, because we're getting 2 tests a week. Yep. And it's a cold and it sucks. But I do think that's to the point again of how our instruments are ourselves, and it's a trippy ass thing for us to deal with.
Absolutely. Yeah. Before we get going, I want to like, we were talking before we really got started on the pod, just about how the job in and of itself of being an actor is this vulnerable thing, because it is us. And I do want to agree with you that I feel like for it to echo more than on the superficial, your work, and just speaking to artists in general, I feel like it's going to be beneficial for you to have it tap into just how authentically you come with yourself. And I feel like if you can start to do that, then you'll understand that you can get through anything. And that's one of the things that I've loved about my career, that it's been through theater that I learned who I was and then got comfortable with, oh no, I can actually indeed survive this. I have the tools. I belong here in this moment. Yeah. And that's something that I will forever cherish, and will be one of the reasons why I can never really shake being a part of the community in some way, shape, or form. Thank you so much for sharing those insights into it, because I think I agree with you on all of it. At this stage of the podcast, we always like to ask, what's that ghost light you wish was left on for you before you started your career that you'd like to leave on for the next generation?
Well, I mean, I think everything that I've just been saying. I mean, I think this art form, which, as far as I know from my theater history class, other than cave painting, telling stories, around the fire, it's like the oldest art form, right? I mean, theater and storytelling, and I don't fear that that's in danger anytime soon. But surely, even prior to COVID, theater as professional theater, or not just professional theater, but theater is a tough thing to keep open, right? I admire the crap out of people who start theater companies and start theaters, and I've done it myself, and it's rough, because you can't do it without dollars, and dollars are thin. And then COVID just showed it that much more. And yet here it's also so resilient, because here we are. And as much as artists have been hurt, maybe disproportionately in a lot of ways through the pandemic, I think this is such an important art form. I think all art is important, but there's something about storytelling, and I caution in our selfie society, where everybody's the star, social media, everyone's the star of our own story now. And we were already the star of our story. Now it just actually looks like we're the star of our story, right? I don't think that's the best way to be a character in our story. And so I caution people who want to get into acting. When I do teach acting to kids or adults, my first question is like, why do you want to do this? And with kids, a lot of times, or I'll ask them, who here wants to be famous, And they can see I'm about to manipulate them, but they, a couple hands will go up, which I think is brave and honest, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's fine. You want to be famous, I get it. And my answer is always the same. That's fine. But if you want to be famous, then be the best actor that you can possibly be, and make that your goal. Don't make being famous your goal. That'll come or it won't, but make being the best actor your goal. And I think that's why it's important to take this craft seriously, for what it is. Have fun with it. It is fun to do this stuff, but take it seriously, because if it all just gets sort of glommed into selfiehood, then it undercuts the vulnerability. Yeah. When we see it in this culture, it's too much. It's hurting us as people. Yeah. Theater or not, it's hurting us all as people to think that we are these images that we are putting forth on little screens. I know it's not ultimately good for us. And so that would be my ghost light, is like, get off the selfie screen. And I'm guilty of it too, right? So it's not judging. I judge myself for it. Get off the selfie screen and get on a stage, or get in a class, do that stuff. And promoting your show through social media it's understandable. Yeah. That should be what it's for. But that's my ghost light. It's just like I want people to understand that even if you never become an actor, or you never become a theater artist, or you never get the privilege of doing this stuff on the level that we're doing it, do it. Be in a show. If you're young, do it in high school. Do that stuff. I've never seen anyone regret that, ever. I've always seen people benefit from it, and so yeah, that's the ghost light that I want. Was that your question?
Absolutely. No, yeah.
Yeah. I don't want this to die, but I also don't want it to be undermined by the wrong intention.
Yeah. It's any theater, any artistic endeavor is the long game.
Yeah.
And you gotta love the crust of it in order to stay in it and for it to actually have the output that you want it to have.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just how I feel about it. Like you don't want to half-ass this. If you love it, you got to be 100%. I'm throwing a whole bunch of cliches out right now, but it's the truth. It's like a relationship with a person. If you love that person, you try whatever you can to do to give them 100% of you every moment. And if you are in a position where you cannot do that, and communicating that you cannot do that isn't enough for them, at the very least, you can articulate that. If you're going to put yourself into an artistic endeavor, give it your all and have that be the focus.
That's right. Yeah. Read Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, and it breaks it down as to why the significant part of any activity, whether it's motorcycle maintenance or philosophy or this, is about the quality of that Zen-like quality of being present for its own sake. And if you make that your reason for doing it, then you're going to have a fine-tuned machine, right? You're going to have a motorcycle that's not going to break down. You're going to have a show that's clicking on all cylinders, like ours feels like it is now too. And that's not to say that perfectionism is, because that can get in your way too. And I have a history of that as well. You can get pretty miserable if that's what you're thinking in that process. But yeah, I think it's worth it to care about the quality of it, because why else do this stuff? I mean, it's too hard otherwise. If you don't think that that's worth it. So
yeah, absolutely. Jordan, thank you again for being on the pod.
My pleasure.
Really
Ray.
appreciate it. It's been a lot of fun, and look forward to seeing you again Thursday night.
I'll see you on Thursday.
High on your chair.
Well, we're coming up. We're coming straight into Halloween, so there's no better time to come see this witchy play.
Get your tickets. Come see the witches. Come see your boy Giles Corey, otherwise known as Sam Gilstrap, and then come see the guest. Jordan is an awesome Danforth, and I really do mean that. Thanks so much for being here, Dan. It's been a long time. Do the damn thing. Just say Rubik's Cube, and that's our safe word. Rubik's Cube's the safe word, and then we'll go like, okay, make sure, and we try and be good about it. If we say Rubik's Cube, we know that this is a place we need to look to cut, and then we'll say, we'll clap or whatever when we're ready to go, and we'll know where to go from there. Yeah. And I'll just ask you some random question like, who do you think is the best tight end the Broncos have ever had? And you'd say Shannon Sharp.
Clarence K. Oh, right, Shannon Sharp.
Okay, if you said anyone but Shannon Sharp, I think we'd end this podcast right now.